So I'd like to get started. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Ian Fette. I am one of the product managers on Google Chrome. And I'm very glad to be here to talk to you today about Google Chrome. This is something that we started roughly 2 years ago, and it's been a lot of hard work from a lot of people at Google. And so it's really sort of very exciting for me to be here and be able to actually share some of this with you. So today what I'd like to do is I'm going to start off with a demo of Chrome. I'm going to show some of the features that I think are really neat. I'm going to show some things that you might not discover. There's a lot of things in Chrome that are perhaps less obvious, less easy to discover. And after that, I'm going to show some tips for webmasters. I'm going to talk a bit about security, which is my area on Google Chrome. And then I want to spend sort of the second half of the talk just taking Q&A. Because I know there's a lot of questions about Google Chrome. There's a lot of things people want to know. And so I just want to give people an opportunity to ask whatever questions you want. So that's sort of the format the talk will take. There is another session in here during the lunch break that is just sort of an informal Q&A. But that's what I'm planning on covering in the next roughly 50 minutes. So I'm going to kick it off now. And I'm going to start by switching over to Chrome and sort of giving a demo. For those of you who have never seen Chrome before, this is Google Chrome. One of our key UI objectives was to minimize the Chrome and maximize the content. We think that what's really important about web pages and what application developers and web developers are doing is the websites themselves. It's not the browser that matters, it's the website. So we really try, whenever we're making UI decisions, to do something that is not impactful on the amount of space that the browser takes up. We don't want to take extra space. So you'll notice that when I pull up a web page like Google, I don't have a title bar, I don't have a status bar down at the bottom, I don't have any of this. I just have the URL bar and the tab strip up at the top. We try to keep our UI very minimalistic. So from an engineering side, we had three main objectives. The first objective was speed. We want Chrome to be fast. We want it to be fast to download Chrome. We want it to be fast to install Chrome. We want Chrome to start up fast. We want web pages to load quickly. And we want to make it fast for users to do what they normally do. So we sat down and we looked at how we ourselves used web browsers, and we looked at how users used web browsers. And we noticed a few things in common. We noticed that a lot of users spend a lot of time doing searches, and they tend to go to the same pages quite frequently. So for me, I spend a lot of time on iGoogle. I spend a lot of time in my email. I spend time going through our bug system for Chromium, which is the open source project where we have released all the code for the web browser. I spend time in Calendar, and I spend time in various other sites. So what we did is we created a new tab page where whenever you click New Tab, you get presented with the sites that you visit most. And so this makes it very easy to go to the sites that you go to often with just one click. So that's one of the things we did for speed. Secondly, we want everything to load fast. So when I click iGoogle, up it comes. It's very snappy. We do a lot of things to try to make pages load faster. So one of the things that we do is we do DNS prefetching. We find that a lot of users spend a lot of time waiting for DNS resolutions to happen. If I look at the links on the page, I've got links to news.google.com, I've got links to finance.google.com somewhere in here. I've got links all over the place, and I have to resolve those host names. So what we do is when the page comes up, we take all the links on the page, and we try to look up what address those links map to. And this saves a lot of time. And you might ask, well, how much time does it save? You can actually see that by going to About, Histograms, and we'll actually show you exactly how much time. If I scroll down to DNS, you can see how much time is being saved by DNS resolutions, how long DNS resolutions are taking. So there's actually a ton of histograms showing all the things we're doing, but this is showing how much latency is saved by hits, and I'm not going to get too into this right now, but that's one of the things that we do to make pages load faster. Another thing we do to make Google Chrome faster is we make it easy to do searches directly from the product. So I do a lot of searches on Google, but I also do searches in other places. For instance, if I go to Amazon to buy a book, in other browsers, I normally have to go to the website first. I have to wait for this website to load. I have to find the search field on the website, and then enter my query. So maybe I'm looking for Lord of the Rings. So that took some time to actually load that page. That's wasted time for me. So we make it easier to do searches, not just on Google, but on other websites from the address bar. So I went to Amazon, I did a search, but I didn't actually set anything up. But Google Chrome is smart enough to recognize that Amazon is a site that supports search. So now, if I type Amazon in the address bar, you'll see on the right that there's an indication I can press Tab to search Amazon.com. I'm going to press Tab, and now I'm searching Amazon.com. So if I type in Lord of the Rings, I'm now going to be taken directly to the results page on Amazon.com. This is using Amazon.com's own search engine. We're not trying to do a Google site search on the site. What we did is we discovered the search field, and we offered that as a search option. Now that I've actually used that search engine from Amazon, you see it also appears on my new tab page. Over here, I've got searches that I've used recently, and here is Amazon.com. So I don't even have to go to the top of the browser and type in Amazon.com. I can simply go to the search box on the right and do a search. So this is one of the ways that we're trying to make it faster for users to do what they do frequently. So what else is in Google Chrome? Well, one of the things that I find happens to me a lot is I get a bunch of different tabs in one browser window. And these tabs are coming from all sorts of activities that I've done over the course of a day. And in other browsers, I might close out these tabs and open them in new windows, or I might lose time trying to shuffle between them. In Google Chrome, you can actually take a tab and pull it out into its own window. And you can take other tabs from other windows. Let me put this side by side. We can actually drag tabs between windows and pull them back into windows. So this makes it easier to reorganize your browsing experience into something that is more efficient for you. So the next feature that I want to demonstrate in Google Chrome, the next feature I want to demonstrate is Incognito Mode. Incognito Mode is something that we offer to help with security and privacy. So what an incognito window is it's something where I've got a brand new cookie store. We're not trying to prevent data being sent to the server. What we're trying to do is essentially give you a clean slate. So this is as if you had cleared all your browser cookies, all of your session data, and just started up a new browser profile. And so now I can do searches. I can search for a gift for my girlfriend. Maybe I'm searching for flowers. And when I close this window, if I look at my history, you'll see that none of that appears in my search history. There's not going to be any cookies saved from that window. This is a brand new profile. It's a new session. It makes it easy to do other things as well. If I'm a web developer, if I'm trying to debug an application I have to log into, you can log in to an application in one window. So right now I'm logged into Google. I can create an incognito window, go to Google, and I'm not logged in. So I have a separate cookie store. This makes it easy for me as a developer to debug applications where I want to log in as an administrator in one window and as a user in another window. Incognito is more than just a blank cookie store, though. It's also a privacy feature as well. So in the main window, you'll see that as I type things in the address bar, like flowers, I get suggestions. I get suggestions for where I might want to go and things I might want to search for. In the incognito window, you'll see I don't actually get any suggestions here. We have turned off search and navigation suggest in incognito to sort of help preserve privacy. We send We do not send a query to Google when you're in incognito. So I've talked a little bit about speed. I want to talk about stability, which is our second design principle. All of the tabs in Google Chrome are, for the most part, in separate processes. I say for the most part because there is a limit. We have only 20 processes that we use, so that we don't create an infinite number. But my iGoogle tab, and if I go to perhaps Microsoft, both of these tabs are going to be running in different processes. So if something crashes, I don't lose the whole browser. So let me show you what that looks like. Here's my task manager inside of Google Chrome. You can see that I have a process for the browser itself, and you can see how much the browser itself is using for RAM and CPU. And then I've got tabs for iGoogle and Microsoft. And I've also got a process for Flash. If Flash, for instance, crashes, over on my iGoogle page where it was using Flash, you're going to see that Flash has crashed, and my Penguins application is no longer working because Flash has died. But the rest of the page is fine. I can still interact with it. I can still do a search. I haven't lost all my work. And if I hit refresh, everything is back. The reason that this is possible is because of the multi-process architecture that Google Chrome uses. So you'll see here that the Microsoft tab is still up. I didn't lose any of my work because of the crash of one tab. If I lose an entire tab, so if my Microsoft tab dies, for instance, you'll see that the Microsoft tab is now no longer available. But again, all of the other tabs are still up, and I can hit reload, and I'm back to where I started. So I want to switch now into talking about a few tips for webmasters. One of the things I demoed earlier was site to search. This is a really cool feature of Google Chrome. It makes it much easier for users to come back to your site very frequently if your site is something that lets users search. Maybe it's a mashup where you're letting people search over multiple search engines. Maybe you're letting people search their contacts or their friends. Whatever kind of search it is, enabling site to search will let users come back to your site more frequently and more easily. So how do you do this? Well, Google Chrome will discover most search fields by itself. What it does is it looks on any root page, so it has to be the root page on a domain. It looks for forms that users type something into and then get redirected to a result page where the query shows up in the query parameter of the URL. So this works for most forms. But some forms that are more complex, so forms with checkboxes or drop-downs, will not be recognized by default. So to get around this, you can publish an OSDD, an open search description document, to make sure that Google Chrome recognizes the fact that your page has search functionality. And by publishing this, simply by a user going to the page, a search entry will be created in the browser. And if you want to actually verify that, you can go in, you can view your page in Chrome, and then you can go to the options dialog, and right here under the search options, there's a manage button, and you can see the other pages I've gone to that have search engines available. So Amazon was what I did not set this up earlier. I just browsed to Amazon, and it's automatically imported into my list of search engines. I could actually set that as my default search engine, but I digress. So, what else can you do? One of the cool things that we allow web applications to do in Google Chrome is to be shown with much less user interface. So I said earlier that we try to get out of the way and take up as less space from the web page as possible. But sometimes that's not enough. You know, if I'm in my mail client, for instance, I don't really need an address bar. I know where I am. I'm in my email. So we let users do something called creating application shortcuts. And what this is it's a way to actually make a web application look like a desktop application. Creating application shortcuts allows a web application to get a shortcut in the start menu, on the desktop, in the quick start bar, and when a user clicks these shortcuts, the application comes up with only a title bar, no URL bar, and it always comes up in its own window such that if you have multiple windows open, it doesn't get clobbered. So sometimes if I'm in Gmail and I click on a link, my Gmail window, my Google Mail window goes away. Or if I'm on another page and it tries to open a link in a new tab, it reuses my Google Mail tab. So this can be rather inconvenient. So how does this work? Well, if you go to any page, you could even do this with the Microsoft homepage. You can click on the page icon and choose Create Application Shortcuts. And by default, we're going to use the title of the page and the favicon. And we let the user choose where they want to create shortcuts. So maybe I want a shortcut in my Start menu. I'm going to hit OK. And now I've actually got Microsoft.com as an application. There's no URL bar. If I close this, go into my Start menu, here's Microsoft. I've got a Microsoft application. You know, I don't really know what it means to be an application. It means different things for different pages, different sites. Maybe the distinction doesn't actually matter. But here's Microsoft with virtually no browser Chrome. It looks almost like a desktop application. For something like Google Mail, apparently I'm actually logged in. I can still create application shortcuts. Maybe I create one for my Start menu as well. And now, it appears not to be there. Okay, so in theory, if I try that again. In theory, when I create application shortcuts in my Start menu, they should actually appear in my Start menu. So for some reason it's not. I'll file a bug later. But what happens is we allow pages to do this and come up with less Chrome. So I mentioned earlier that we, by default, just use the title of the page, we use the current URL that you're on, and we use the favicon of the website. This isn't always ideal. If I'm in Google Mail, for instance, and I'm actually reading an email, the title of my window is something like Google Mail coupons from some website. And that's not really a useful name for a shortcut on my desktop, because I'm trying to get back to Google Mail. I'm not trying to get to coupons from some website. So we allow websites to publish something called an application description. And what this description does is it tells Google Chrome which URL to use, it tells Google Chrome which title to give the shortcut, and it also lets you provide both a low and high resolution icon, because taking the favicon and scaling that up to a desktop icon doesn't always result in something that looks good. So if you want to enable this for your site, it's very simple. There's instructions on the web for how to do this. It's the same way that you would do it for Gears. And then users who go to your website and create application shortcuts can get a better experience. Finally, my last tip for Webmasters is not to hold back on JavaScript. We've done a lot of work in Google Chrome to make JavaScript fast. We have a brand new JavaScript engine called V8, which was developed by a team up in Aarhus in Denmark, pretty much from the ground up. And what it does is it actually takes your JavaScript and it compiles it down into native bytecode so that when it runs very, very fast. You can give it a try for yourself. Just download Google Chrome and try going to your favorite JavaScript benchmark or your own application and try it out. But the takeaway is that JavaScript has really enabled a lot of the new applications on the web. It's enabled things like Google Maps, it's enabled iGoogle gadgets, and it's enabled all sorts of cool mashups. And by making JavaScript more performant, by making it faster, we can make even more web applications possible. So we view JavaScript as very important in Google Chrome. We're continuing to do everything we can to make JavaScript faster, so don't hold back. Use as much JavaScript as you need. So since I'm the product manager for security on Google Chrome, I want to talk a little bit about some of the security features. Back when the first browsers were developed, early to mid-90s, the landscape was very different. Malware wasn't really so much a problem on the web. Certainly you didn't have people phishing Amazon.com back in 1995. And nowadays, both of these problems are pervasive on the web. There's many, many phishing websites. There's malware websites all over the place. We see a lot of malware actually being served up in search results. You see malware on very high traffic websites that just get compromised, be that via hacking or SQL injection. And so these threats are something that we wanted to do our best to protect against in Google Chrome. So one of the ways that we do this is by sandboxing. What does sandboxing mean? The goal is to reduce the attack surface of the web browser. And how we do that is we take all the code that handles untrusted content, so things like the HTML on the page, all the JavaScript, basically as much of the things that come from the web as we can. We want to get running in a low privilege environment. So I explained earlier the fact that Google Chrome has multiple processes. All of these processes are not created equal. We have one special process called the browser process, which handles things like drawing the UI to the screen, handling your cookies, managing your cache, and then there's a bunch of other processes called renderers. And these renderers roughly correspond to tabs. The renderers are what take your HTML and actually render it into a page and execute the JavaScript. These things should not be able to actually harm you. There's no reason that HTML or JavaScript on a page should be able to do anything to your computer without your consent. Just visiting a page should not allow a website to install malware on your computer. It shouldn't allow a page to do something that will affect your computer once you close the browser. So what we do is we use some Windows APIs to reduce the privileges of the renderer process. Processes by default have the rights of a user, so they can read from your file system, they can read files on your hard drive, they can write to the file system, they can open network connections to other websites, and this is not something that an HTML page should be able to do in a proper security context. So we strip away all these privileges, such that the renderer that is actually drawing the web page has no rights. The renderer cannot write to the file system, it can't open sockets and connect to other servers, and it can't read any files from your file system. So the goal is that if there is malicious content, if there is malicious HTML or JavaScript that somehow exploits a vulnerability in the rendering engine, because the rendering engine is running with no privileges, that exploit should not be able to persist itself. It should not be able to install any malware on the hard drive, and it should not be able to somehow create connections back to other servers and start acting as a bot in a botnet, for instance. That's the goal of sandboxing. Because these processes have no rights, they also can't talk to each other. So if one tab is compromised, it should not be able to affect other tabs. So if I go to an evil website in one tab and I have my banking and my iGoogle and other tabs, in theory, these tabs should not be able to interact and somehow steal data from each other. We also wanted to address the problem of phishing. So although we do have a minimal UI, we want to make sure that we still present important security information in the address bar. On all pages, regardless of whether they're HTTP or HTTPS, whether they're secured with SSL or not, what we do is we highlight the host name of the page. So sometimes phishers will try to create inventive host names like mybank.xyz.evil.com. What we're going to highlight is just evil.com. We're not going to highlight the whole host. We just highlight the top few components of the host name. We also don't highlight the path, so we make it easier for users to figure out what website they're on. For websites that support EV certificates, which stands for Extended Validation SSL certificates, we take the organization name and we display it in the address bar next to the lock. For sites using SSL, if you click the lock, we present additional information, such as the identity of the website you're connected to, details of the connection, whether you're using SSL or not, and history information. So we present whether you have been to this website before. If this is your bank, if it's a site you go to frequently, it's probably a site you've been to before. And if you're seeing that you've never been to this site before, maybe that's something that should cause you to think. In this case, I don't actually have an account at Deutsche Bank. I've never been there before, so this is accurate. But if I were a customer, I would expect to see that I have been to this site a number of times since maybe a few years ago. Finally, Google Chrome includes something called safe browsing. Safe browsing is another way that we try to help prevent users from going to sites that may harm them or their computer. So safe browsing is designed to help prevent users from going to phishing or malware websites. How this works is that the browser downloads a list of known phishing and malware websites to the local computer. And then as you browse the web, whenever a URL is requested, we check that URL against the list that's stored locally on the computer. To be clear, we're not sending each URL off to Google and asking, is this URL good or bad? We're doing a check against the local blacklist. The blacklist is actually rather large, though. It contains hundreds of thousands of entries, and each of these entries is a hash. So we take all the URLs that we know to be either phishing or malware, we hash them, and we send them to the computer. Most of these URLs, though, a normal person is never going to visit. So to preserve bandwidth, we only send the first 32 bits of the SHA-256 hash. So rather than sending 256 bits for each website, we send 32. This lets us use less space on the user's computer, but it also means that when a user gets a match on a URL, we need to figure out if it's a match on just the first 32 bits of the hash, or if it's a match on the full 256-bit hash, and the user is actually at a phishing or malware website. So if a user goes to a phishing or malware website, there will be a match made locally on the computer against a 32-bit hash, and that 32-bit hash is then sent to Google asking, what are all the full 256-bit hashes that match this 32-bit hash? Again, we're not sending the URL, we're just sending the first part of the hash of that URL. So we can't definitively say on the Google server side that user A was at page X because we never get that information. We just get part of a one-way hash. So this is also to help, again, preserve user privacy. So how does this look like in Google Chrome? Well, if you go to a malware website, like malware.testing.google.test/testing/malware/ you get a warning saying that this site may harm your computer. And we tell you that this site appears to host malware. We give you an explanation of what malware is. And if you want, you can actually click here, and we'll give you more information about this page. So we'll tell you when we found suspicious activity on this website. We'll tell you what kind of activity we found. We'll tell you whether this website was responsible for infecting any other websites. We give you all sorts of information. And so, most of the time, if you get this warning, you want to just get out of here. You don't want to go to this website. But we don't want to censor any content. We don't want to prevent users from doing what they want to do. So if you really want to, you can check the box and click proceed anyways. We try to make this a two-step process because we don't want anyone doing this by default. This is not something where there's a lot of false positives. What this means is that we run a bunch of virtual machines at Google, and we actually saw one of those machines get exploited when we visited this website, so we're pretty sure something is going on here. We really suggest that you don't go to this website, but again, we let users proceed if they want. Or they can click back, and they're taken back to where they were previously. So that's safe browsing. And before I move to Q&A, I just want to mention that we have made the source code for Google Chrome available. It's available under a BSD style license, so any of you are free to take it and do what you want with it. You can make your own web browser. You can contribute back to the project. It's open source. It's all available at chromium.org, along with instructions for how to build the source code, how to contribute patches back. We really want to see developer involvement here. So we definitely encourage you to go to chromium.org and check it out. And with that, I'd like to take questions. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about how Google Chrome works or features, so go ahead. Can you tell a little bit more about that OSDD file? So the question was whether I can tell a bit more about the open search description document. So going back to my slide, I had said that to enable tab to search, you can provide an OSDD file. OSDD is an open standard. I don't remember the URL of the standard off the top of my head, but if you use your favorite search engine to search for OSDD, you will find a description of the file format itself. It's essentially a very small XML format that lets you specify what the name of the search engine is, what the URL of the search engine is, what parameters it can take. And you can either embed this description directly into the document itself, or you can just use a link tag. I think you just say something like link rel equals the URL to the OSDD file, and there's some special way that you indicate that it's actually an open search description and not some other link. Yes?
You showed that you were searching for flowers.
Mm-hmm.
How is decided which flower shop shows up at the top listings?
So the question was, I did in my demo a search for flowers. Excuse me. And the question was, how is it decided what actually gets shown in these results? So what we do is we contact your default search engine. And if your default search engine supports Suggest, so for instance Google or Yahoo, we use that search provider to determine what gets shown. And so in Google's case, we provide both navigation suggestions, which are sites that a lot of people go to that relate to the query, and we provide search suggestions, which are things that a lot of other users search for that are related to what you have typed so far. I can't get into the details of exactly how those particular results are generated, but if, for instance, I turn my default search engine to Yahoo, and I just say make that default, you'll see now, for instance, when I type flowers, I'm actually getting a different set of suggestions. Earlier, the suggestions were flowers for Algernon and something else. Now I'm getting suggestions for search Yahoo for 1-800-Flowers, wedding flowers, and pictures of flowers. And this is using Yahoo's service. Go ahead.
What about ads to get in this list? Some sort of ad engine via Play Store? Type in place?
So we do not... this is sort of like organic search results. We don't provide a way to buy your way into the suggestions, at least for the Google side. I can't speak for Yahoo or Ask.com or any of the other providers, but for Google, these are like organic search results. They're not influenced by whether or not somebody is an advertiser. Yes, in the back.
Two questions. One is, when is it going to be available for other platforms like the Mac? And the second is, as I understand you're using WebKit rendering engine. How is it talking to the WebKit guys when they develop that product? How do you decide when to put in new versions of WebKit into new versions of Chrome?
Yep. So there were two questions. First is, what about Mac and Linux? When are they coming? And the answer is that, I'm a Linux user primarily. My box at home is Linux. My box at work is Linux. I did get a Windows box when I started working on Chrome, but at heart, I'm a Linux user, so I want a Linux version now. Unfortunately, we can't always have what we want right away. I know it's a sad reality, but we really wanted to get something out there. We wanted to sort of show these new ideas. We wanted to show things like sandboxing and the multi-process architecture. And so we focused on getting something out for Windows, which does have a majority of users. But we have teams right now working on a Mac version, working on a Linux version. You can actually see the progress being made in the source code. You can check out the current version. Right now, we're working on trying to get the renderer. So there's something called test shell, which basically just takes a renderer and lets you type in a URL and render a page, but it doesn't have things like cookies and history, and it's very basic. We're trying to get that working on Mac and Linux right now, and we're trying to get that passing all the layout tests to make sure that all the pages render properly. That's our first milestone that we're working on right now. Once we get that up and running, we're going to start actually getting the full browser working. But we definitely have teams working on that right now. And when I say teams, I mean like people from the core Chrome team. It's not like we're shipping it off somewhere and saying, hey, can you please port this to Mac and Linux? No, we have one team, and this one team is working on all the versions of the browser. So it's something we're working on right now. It's something that we know a lot of users want. We want it to, and we're trying to get it done as quickly as possible. The second question was about WebKit and when we decide to use a new version of WebKit and how we work with Apple. And so the reason that we chose WebKit is that it's a very clean code base. It's small. It's fast. We're very happy with WebKit, and we actually made some modifications to WebKit to get it to work into Chrome. We had to make modifications for some of the multi-process architecture. We had to make modifications to get it work with V8. And we're busy trying to contribute those patches back up to Apple. We don't want to continue to have our own forked version of WebKit. We don't want to create yet another rendering engine that web developers have to worry about. We really want to just use the stock version of WebKit. We did take the 3.1 branch of WebKit when we released the initial beta. This is because we were trying to make sure that everything was stable, trying to get everything working. We're now in the process, if you, again, look at our code base, if you go to our IRC channel and see what we're talking about, it's all open. We're trying to merge to tip of tree WebKit and get everything working again with the latest version of WebKit tip of tree. Going forward, we'll try to stay and keep using current versions of WebKit. You'll probably see some new releases coming soon that contain a newer version of WebKit. So we're definitely not stuck on 3.1. It's not going to be 3.1 forever. That's just what we needed to do to get the beta out the door. Yes?
Will there be any extensions to Chrome like for Firefox?
The question was, will there be any extensions to Chrome like for Firefox? I know that's something that a lot of people are asking for. It's something that has really helped Firefox to succeed, is having a great extension mechanism. We definitely want to have an extension mechanism. I mean, we publish a huge extension ourselves. We have Google Toolbar, which is an extension for Firefox and IE. So there's a lot of people asking, like, when can I get Google Toolbar? So we have people within the company pressuring us to get an extension system. That's another thing that we're working on. We basically had to make a decision. Do we want to release a browser with an extension system and wait however long that takes to get it right and get it working? Or do we want to release a beta now so that we can sort of show everybody what we're doing? We can come into the open and we can do the work in the open source community and get feedback. And we decided that we wanted to get the browser out and we would continue to work on an extension system. So it's something we're working on now. We're trying to figure out a design for the extension system. We don't have a design fully baked right now. One thing that we know we can't do is we can't really support the Firefox extension model. So Firefox extensions rely on things like Zool, which is what lets you sort of script and interact with the Firefox UI. We don't use Zool. We don't really have a scriptable UI, so we can't support native Firefox extensions. So our extension model will, by out of necessity, be different. But we're hoping to support the types of extensions that people want to write. Somebody has already written something that lets Grease Monkey-like things work in Google Chrome using our accessibility framework. We want to get something like that working inside of Chrome itself, so it's very easy to develop extensions and add extensions into Google Chrome. It's coming. I can't say exactly when, but it's one of the things that are high up on our list of priorities. Yeah? So there was a question, can you tell us something about the release cycle of Google Chrome? When is the next major version coming? So we at Google sort of subscribe to the theory of release early, release often. We actually publish every single build on chromium.org. You can download the current build off of the current tip of tree. But we realize that most people don't do that. So we're trying to get out builds as quickly as possible. For security builds, our first security release was actually done in roughly 24 hours. Somebody found a vulnerability, and within 24 hours we had a patch out first. So for security builds, we're trying to get a very, very fast release cycle. For things like picking up new versions of WebKit, new features, that's not going to be 24 hours certainly, but we're hoping to do this often. So on the order of monthly, every few months, something like that. it's certainly not going to be the case that there's only 1 or 2 Chrome releases per year. As far as when the next one's coming, I can't give you an exact date. We're trying to stabilize the tree and get everything working soon, I hope. Yes? So the question is it possible to build Chrome on Open Solaris? Right now, Chrome itself only builds on Windows. The work of porting it onto Mac and Linux is still underway. Right now, for the Linux build, which is closest to something that you could compile on Open Solaris, we don't have even test shell working right now. Going forward, we plan on supporting Windows, Mac, and Linux. We are not likely to support things like Open Solaris or OS/2. But the code is open source, so certainly somebody could take the code and do whatever's required to port it over to Open Solaris, but that's not something that we intend to do. Yes, in the front.
Which standards, especially like CSS and HTML, is met by Chrome?
So the question is which standards are met by Chrome, like HTML and CSS? So we're using the WebKit rendering engine, and WebKit is one of the better rendering engines when it comes to standards compliance. So obviously things like HTML4 work. WebKit has already implemented some of the HTML5 extensions coming on. For CSS, WebKit is pretty compliant when it comes to CSS2, CSS3. I can't give you the full list of all the standards and all the bugs in implementing those standards, but WebKit is certainly one of the more standards compliant rendering engines, and as we pick up new versions of WebKit, we'll pick up any fixes that they make, and as they implement more HTML5 features, we'll also pick that up. So we're trying to be as standards compliant as possible. Yes?
In some blog mentioned that Chrome will show up on Android. Is there something like that?
So the question is, there was a blog saying Chrome will show up on Android. Is it true? As I said earlier, Chrome runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Chrome does not run on Android. I've seen the pictures of somebody photoshopping Chrome on Android. I saw another one where somebody had photoshopped Chrome on an Amiga. As much as I wish they were true, Chrome is not on Android and it's not on the Amiga. Android, yeah, that's sorry. Yes.
Are there better tools planned for web developers, like better Firefox or Chrome?
So the question was, are there better tools planned for web developers like Firebug for Chrome? We're trying to do what we can for web developers. Some of this will definitely depend on getting an extension model in place. So Firebug is a great extension to Firefox. Hopefully when we have an extension model, people can create other extensions that help web developers create and debug pages in Google Chrome. Already, though, we support the inspector from WebKit. So if I just right-click on a page, I can choose Inspect Element, and up comes the Web Inspector. This is a pretty good debugging tool for actually seeing what's going on with the page. I can also bring up, under Developer in the page menu, I have a JavaScript console where I can view any errors in the JavaScript. And also in the Developer menu, we have something called the Debug JavaScript, which actually brings up a debugger that lets me insert breakpoints. I can execute JavaScript in the context of the page. It's a little scary interface. It takes a little while to get used to, but it's actually very powerful. So this is what we have right now. More will be coming, I'm sure, once we get an extension mechanism going. But we definitely want to do what we can to help developers create and debug awesome web pages and web applications. Any other questions? Yes? The question is, which SVG engine do we use? This is actually a really good question. We have our own graphics engine in Chrome called Skia. So we've sort of ripped out parts of WebKit and we use Skia for some things. As far as SVG, I don't honestly remember if we're using which rendering engine we're using for SVG. I'm sorry, it's not my part of the code. I'm working on security. So I would definitely encourage you, if you want to know, to either hop on our IRC channel, which is #chromium-dev on Freenode, or we have Google Groups. So if you go to groups.google.com, we've got a Chromium Dev Google group, or you can check out the source code from chromium.org and try to find out for yourself. But easiest way is probably to go on the Google Groups or the IRC channel, and somebody could definitely answer that for you very quickly. Any other questions? Yes, sorry, in the corner.
I have really mixed feelings about the unique ID a Google browser has. As a developer, I ask myself, first, can I use it for myself to do some things like can identify a user without having him to log in somewhere? And secondly, is it to be used in the incognito mode as well, or is there no unique ID?
So the question is about unique IDs in Chrome and whether they can be used by developers to identify users on web pages, and whether there's anything in incognito mode that changes the use of any unique IDs in Chrome. It's a good question. We've got a lot of questions about this, and I want to make sure that everybody understands what there is in Chrome in terms of unique IDs. So the first thing in Chrome that's a unique ID is actually called unique ID in the source code. It's what we use for sending back usage statistics and crash dumps. So all of the usage statistics and crash dumps are sent with an ID that helps us identify which installation of Chrome these came from. These usage statistics are opt-in, and they are off by default. So the default is not to send any usage statistics or any crash dumps back to Google. If you turn this on, we send anonymized statistics, things like histograms, how often you've clicked on the back button, whether you accept suggestions from search, but these aren't tied to a user account. There is a unique ID that helps us determine which browser instance they're coming from so that we can deduplify things and understand trends, but they are not tied to a particular user ID. And again, that's opt-in, and it's off by default. Another unique ID in Google Chrome actually comes with the installer. So the installer has a unique ID that lets us identify the installation of Google Chrome and the machine that's installed on. This is separate from Google Chrome, though. This is maintained by the auto update system. And the reason that we have this is to allow us to know how many users are actually using Google Chrome. It's to allow us to understand how many people are uninstalling Google Chrome, to basically help track the growth of Google Chrome and notice when users are uninstalling it. This unique ID is not tied to any account information, so we don't tie it to your Google account. We don't tie it to your account cookie that contains your email address. It's just a random ID that lets us count the number of installations, but it's not something that we use to try to tie to individual users and do any sort of tracking. The third thing, so let me change my search provider back to Google. If your search provider is Google, and only if your search provider is Google, make default. So if your search provider is Google, you'll see that any searches you do from Google contain a parameter called RLZ. And there have been a lot of questions about what this parameter is. This parameter does not uniquely identify a Chrome installation. What this parameter signifies is where and how you got Google Chrome. So this RLZ parameter for me means that I got Google Chrome from google.com/Chrome. I didn't get it from a homepage promotion or from any sort of partner distribution. It's a code that's shared by a number of people. It doesn't uniquely identify me or my installation, and it is only sent when you are searching Google. If your search engine is sent to Yahoo or some other search engine, the RLZ parameter won't be sent. The parameter is also used to track certain lifecycle events of Chrome, such as the first time a search is done, or the first time the product is run, or if the default search engine is set to Google Chrome. but it's only some very basic life cycle events that help us understand, do people who download Google Chrome from a homepage promotion versus from the download page, do they use it differently? Are these distribution mechanisms working? It's not something that we use to try to, again, track users or anything like that. Again, it doesn't even uniquely identify a user. The final part of the question is whether there was anything in Incognito Mode that addresses this. And when you go into Incognito Mode, new Incognito Window, we turn off Suggest by default. So if I type in flowers, I'm not getting any suggestions. So nothing that you type in is being sent to Google here. There's no suggest queries being asked for, nothing being logged. Obviously, if you do a search for Google or if you interact with any website in Incognito, we're not affecting whatever logging happens on the server side. So if I do a search on Google or a search on Yahoo, Google or Yahoo could still log the fact that that search was done, but we're not proactively sending anything to the server here. Can you, a developer? So there's nothing exposed to web pages to allow you as a developer to identify a user. So the question was, are any of those IDs exposed to an application? Can they be used as a developer to identify a user or track a user? And the answer is no. None of those IDs are exposed to a web page or an application. They can't be used by a web developer to somehow log you in or uniquely identify you. The RLZ parameter is only sent to Google searches, and the unique ID for the unique ID for UMA for user metrics is only sent if you have enabled metrics, statistics, and crash reporting, which is opt-in and off by default, and it's only sent with those metrics calls. And the unique IDs in the auto-update system are only sent with the auto-update pings. So there's nothing that's exposed to a website that would allow the website to use any of these unique IDs to track a user. Sorry, that was a long answer, but it's a really good question. I want to make sure that I gave a thorough answer. So I definitely appreciate the question. It's about 1:15, so I think lunch is probably ready out in the hall. So there's going to be an informal Q&A session in here during the break. I will stick around if people have any further questions that they want to ask. I definitely want to thank all of you for coming. I really appreciate your being here. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share Google Chrome with you. I encourage you to check out our open source project at chromium.org. And here you can find the source code. You can find instructions to compile it. Please check it out. Give us feedback. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.